Okay, go ahead.
There we go.
All right, Liz, thank you so much for coming to us tonight, and you have so much to share with us. And thank you for all your wealth of knowledge, and go ahead.
Hey, you guys. My name is Liz James, and I live in Anna, Texas, which is about an hour north of Dallas, and I am a pharmacist. I stepped away from pharmacy in September of 2020 after 30 years behind the counter. I'm still a pharmacist. I work as a consulting pharmacist and teach people basically how to live a more holistic life with whatever medical challenges they may have. So we're going to go ahead and get started here because I'm gonna move pretty fast because I have a whole lot to cover. And I'm going to try to share my screen here. Hang on just a second. Okay, Stacy, what can you see? Can you see the disclaimer?
Yes, I can, and you as well.
Okay, very good. Okay, so disclaimer first, I'm not a doctor. I'm a pharmacist. I'm just trying to make the world a healthier place, one person at a time. You can read the rest of it while I talk. I was taught in pharmacy school, just like every other pharmacist that comes out of school. And we are taught that basically there's a drug for nearly every illness or dysfunction. You know, I have always done a ton of studying after I got out of school and while I was in school too. And quite frankly, I believed everything that was put before me until about 10 years after I graduated from pharmacy school. I had a little bit of an accident and I broke my wrist and found out I was osteopenic. And at the same time, the doctor kind of said, and by the way, your cholesterol is too high. And that was when I was in my 30s. And it really, that really kind of threw me for a loop because I didn't think that I had anything wrong with me, you know, but I did. So that, the medication that they were wanting to put me on at that time was not something that I had any interest in. And so that really started my own wellness journey on my own, you know, because I just believed everything everybody else said and that had been taught to me. So the other thing that has been kind of interesting that I've watched morph over time is that the original pharmacist oath back in 91, when I graduated from pharmacy school, included the part of the Hippocratic Oath about doing no harm, similar to a medical doctor's oath. And I've noticed, I think it was somewhere around 2006, maybe, that was removed from the pharmacist's oath. And that's just an aside, and it's very interesting to me. But healthcare professionals, doctors, nurses, pharmacists, we are not taught what health is. We are taught pathology and treatment and management of disease and dysfunction. We are not taught how to restore ourselves to good health. We are encouraged not to buck the system, and we're encouraged to go with the flow. And I'm sure there's probably nurses on here, maybe even another pharmacist or another healthcare professional. And that's because of the alliance with insurance and with big commerce medicine. They have protocols and they have house rules, and that's the way things go. So, you know, when I first started speaking out about the things that we need to be talking about as a pharmacist, you know, it's kind of scary. It's because, but at the same time, I feel very morally obligated to speak about what is true. So what we're going to talk about today is a couple of things. One, Western healthcare professionals don't always know what they don't know. And that's because they're taught a very specific way. They're not taught, like we're going to talk today about what medication does. We're taught the side effects, but we're not really taught the reason behind the side effects, right? And sometimes we'll run into doctors or other healthcare professionals who go so far as to criticize what they don't understand, right? We've all been, since we all walk the holistic lifestyle, we've all probably been in that or seen it or felt it one way or another, where we felt like we've been criticized for trying to live a more holistic life. And it's it may have crossed some of your minds at some point. You might have asked, why won't the drug industry work with natural products? And that is because natural products are not patentable, and therefore they don't have the value that big pharma is looking for in a medication. And the gross reality is, we as consumers, we are worth more if we are sick than if we're healthy. So the system is really stacked against us. You have to find, it takes a really good doctor who wants to utilize all the systems in order to have a very healthy set of clients, right? So the other thing is, the definition of insanity, of course, is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And the health of people now versus the health of our grandparents or great-grands, and those are the people who grew gardens, who lived on farms, who lived active lives out of necessity. And they had very little exposure to processed foods, and consequently, cancer and dementia and autoimmune disorders and digestive disorders, type 2 diabetes, all of these things that are rampant in our world today just didn't really exist in any great degree back then. So unfortunately, we have the dubious honor of being the sickest generation and the first generation to be predicted to have a shorter lifespan than our parents. And that's a really sad thing to think of, especially because we're supposed to be so modernized, right? And the other thing that we have to overcome and remember is that many people have been conditioned to expect a prescription when they go to the doctor. And maybe not this group, maybe this is not the group that I'm speaking to here, but for the people who visit a pharmacy a lot, when they go to the doctor, they want something in return. And what they want in return is generally a piece of paper that has a prescription on it. And if they don't get one, they get upset. And I've talked to a lot of patients that have voiced that to me. So, I know it's true. And finally, the US RDI, which is the recommendation for preventing nutritional deficiencies. The US RDI is put together in recommending deficiencies. It is not put together so that a patient or a client or a person can actually feel optimally healthy. There's a big difference. I mean, there's a big difference between you're getting just enough vitamin D so that you don't get rickets versus your vitamin D load being so good that your immune system is robust, right? Okay, hang on just a second. I got to get caught up here on the slides. There we go. Okay. So right now, what we're dealing with in the United States is there is an estimated adverse drug events is over 2.2 million listed adverse drug events a year. And over 100,000 deaths per year in the United States are attributable to these events. That is equal to one jumbo jet plane crashing every single day of the year. That's a lot. And thankfully, again, in this group that I'm talking to you guys, I mean, we can be so thankful we're not part of that group. But we know people who are. We know people who are in our own families who are experiencing adverse events every day. It is impossible to out supplement, out medicate, or out oil a lifestyle that is chronic, that is full of chronically poor choices. Genetics do play a role, but epigenetics plays a bigger role, a much, much, much bigger role. And epigenetics is essentially how your environment, the role it plays on your personal health. And your environment might be what you eat. It might be your stress load. It might be the chemicals in your house, hopefully not in this group. It could be any number of things. We just have to remember that we actually have way more control. Epigenetics, I've heard and seen different numbers. Anywhere from 90 to 95% of the outcome actually depends on our environment. Our genetics, for the most part, play a much, much smaller part. So we have that to think about. But we have a lot of responsibility in our outcome, and eventually the consequences of choices will catch up to us. This medications, we think of medications as having side effects. The side effects, and I'm just going to call them consequences. The consequences of taking medication on a chronic basis eventually will cause some sort of depletion in the body. Medication, by very definition, is a toxin, and it does something to the body to prevent the symptom from showing up in the body. And that depletion that is actually occurring over time, and oftentimes it's more than one depletion, is a vitamin, a mineral, a hormone, or an enzyme. And it can happen very fast. It can happen slowly over time, like over a couple months. It can happen over years. And, you know, we all know people who've been on medication for years and years and years, and that never ends well. It just never ends well. So we also have to look at proper nutrition, and proper nutrition is something that we're all having to strive for now. And even eating organic often isn't enough, because if you eat organically, you still have to know who your farmer is, because they can do the organic things, but if they're not treating the soil right, or if they're producing hybridized food where shippability has preempted the number or the amount of vitamins and minerals in a product, which happens a lot, because if a fruit or vegetable is very tender, it doesn't ship well, and then there's a lot of loss. So, you know, we live on a farm, and we do try to grow as much as we can on our own. And I also try to seek out other farmers for whatever we don't grow, so that we can get as clean a food as we can possibly get. This is why, like, the einkorn is so important. That's available to us. It's available to us, and it's important for a lot of other reasons too. And that's another show for another day, right? So let's see here. Medications, while still considered helpful, are still toxins, right? And they should only be used when benefit outweighs the risk. And there will always be a time for benefit outweighing the risk. 2, Um, how can a molecule never before found in our body possibly be advantageous for our body's function? See, God did not design us to need medicine. He really didn't. Something synthetic doesn't belong in the body. The other thing we need to do is we need to find a way to move, whether that's even water aerobics or yoga, or if you're not used to moving, start slow and graduate. Okay. We've got somebody that needs to mute somewhere. Okay. Let's see here. So we've got supplements, we've got clean choices, and today we're just going to work on knowledge. All right. The supplements that we already use, if you're not already really familiar with Young Living, hopefully you are. We have so many supplements available to us, and that's really what I'm going to focus on today, is how to mediate medication with the supplements that we probably already have in our own home. And you have to remember that Young Living supplements are not, you're not comparing apples to apples when you look at a supplement from Amazon. We have the luxury of having this highly nutritional supplement that is also oil infused, and there's a synergy there. It's like adding a fuel booster to your gas tank. So the oil that is the essential oils that are in the supplements are actually creating a much additive effect to whatever the product is that we're going to be using. So now, and naturally sourced supplements are also much safer than some of the synthetically derived supplements that are, like you would get at Amazon that you can pick up for a couple of dollars. I just really don't advise it. The body will then have to detoxify from that as well, and you'll end up sometimes doing more harm than good to your body. So you really do have to know your supplements. You also want to make sure that you've kicked out your toxins in your home, right? We've got our clean choices. That means you're kicking out and you're bringing in your thieves cleaner, your clean skincare products, and your makeup. You've got maybe you've gotten a filter on your water supply. You're no longer using Glade plugins. You're using your diffuser. You're not using perfume. You're using your oils as perfume. I never really wore perfume, but I get told all the time, it's like, what are you wearing? You smell so good. So that's a huge blessing to be able to have everything that we've got. We're going to start, I'm just going to start by grouping, and I'm going to be dealing with some of the most commonly used medications that we see typically, either as a pharmacist, or you can look up the list of the most commonly prescribed medications. But before we get started, I'm not recommending that anyone stop taking medication if you happen to be on some of these medications. That's something that you're going to have to talk to your healthcare professional about. What you do need to know, though, is that these medications, if you want to not advance into more and more and more medications, you want to pay attention to the remediation options that I'm going to give you here, okay? So the first thing we're going to talk about are acid reducers. And the acid reducers are like Protonix, Nexium, Prevacid, Prilosec, Zantac. I'm sure you've heard all of those, either in advertisements on TV or in newsprint or on the internet. And the interesting thing about this is that all of these medications, I know people who've been on them for decades, and none of them are designed for use longer than 8 continuous weeks. I mean, that's an FDA on the package insert information. They're not designed for use longer than 8 continuous weeks. Long-term use increases the risk, and I'm just going to throw these out here. Long-term use increases the risk for kidney disease, heart disease, ischemic stroke, dementia, increased risk for bone fractures, candida overgrowth, irritable bowel syndrome, poor vision, anemia, brittle nails, fatigue, hair loss, hearing loss, a development of gluten sensitivity, decreased immune system function, and insomnia. That's just part of the list. But the reality is that this medication, number one, most of them are available over the counter now. And for the ones that are not at higher strengths, or they're not available over the counter, the doctors just write prescriptions for them without actually doing an acid test to make sure that the person actually does have a high acid issue. Having a high acid issue is very rare. It's not common at all. And in reality, as we age, or as we have poor choices with our food, the acid actually decreases in the stomach. And when that happens, then other bacteria can move in, like H. pylori, and bad things start happening in the stomach. So when you have, possibly, instead of too much acid, if you have too little acid, and then you take something that creates even less acid, you're really creating quite a large problem. And as you can see here, you end up with a nutritional wasteland, because it virtually affects every nutrient in your body the longer you're on this stuff. But especially minerals, like in the CoQ10, protein, melatonin, and glutathione. I mean, macronutrients, or macro minerals and micro minerals, are all very, very important for our homeostatic well-being. You know, some of you may have heard of CoQ10, but don't know exactly what it is. Well, CoQ10 is, it's a fat-soluble vitamin-like compound. It's made by the body and stored in the mitochondria. And as it goes down in availability in the body, which production of it decreases as you age anyway, then your mitochondria can't function as well. And if your mitochondria isn't functioning as well, your energy level will go way, way, way down. And in addition, you'll have increased risk for oxidative damage. You'll have bacterial and virus opportunistic situations. You will have an increased risk for heart events. Okay, this is good stuff. Well, it's not good stuff. It's actually bad stuff, but it's good stuff to know, right? So with that said, I know this page is like overload, but these are all the things that we have available to us for all of the things that are being depleted in our body. We have for the Super B and Super C and Master Formula and Ninja Red. Those are all, Ninja Red, if I had a major health concern going on, I'd be drinking bottles and bottles of the Ninja Red every single day. We need our minerals, the Super Cal Plus, the Ninja Red, the Mineral Essence, the CoQ10. Where's CoQ10 found in Young Living products? Well, it's in MindWise, it's in CardioGize, and it's in OmegaGize. Okay. If you if you talk to your healthcare professional, if you've been on acid reducers for years, and you want to try to get off of them at some point, and you've been on them for a very long time, it's a weaning process, and that's something, again, that you'll want to work with your health professional about. The other things, obviously, the protein, the amino-wise, the pure protein complete, those are not on the slides. I ran out of room. But in terms of protein replacement that's easily digestible, those are something to think about too. And then for our melatonin deficiency, over time, you'll find if you're on one of these products, you'll have a hard time sleeping. And that's why we've got the Sleep Essence and the ImmuPro, because now you've got a melatonin deficiency thanks to the acid reducer. The glutathione production is really important. Sulfurzyme, Ninja Red, both help with glutathione production in the body. All right. Moving on to antibiotics. Specifically, Cipro and Levaquin, clindamycin, those three on the top, the Cipro, Levaquin, clindamycin, any of the quinolones and the clindamycin, those are extremely dangerous antibiotics and should only be used when risk outweighs benefit. I'm sorry, benefit outweighs risk. Approximately 11.4 million prescriptions a year are unnecessary and are given for viral infections where antibiotics will do no good. Common side effects of chronic use, especially for the Cipro and Levaquin, would include heart disease, fatigue, IBS or bowel disorders. For all chronic use antibiotics, you've got a potential for eczema, low thyroid issues or hypothyroidism, bone loss, and weight gain. Clindamycin and the quinolones, they can cause permanent depletion of mitochondrial DNA. The mitochondria, which is just what I was talking about when we were talking about acid reducers. And I'm going to keep revisiting the mitochondria situation because it's really, really important to understand that no mitochondrial toxicity testing is done or required by the FDA when they're looking to approve any sort of medication. So the mitochondria is free game. If there's damage done, it's not something and the quinolones, they can do so much damage to tendons. Lisa just made a comment on there. She's a pharmacist as well. So it's very, very important to really understand, does the benefit outweigh the risk whenever you're getting a medication? Other medications, just in general, since we're talking about the mitochondria that can cause mitochondrial damage, include the statins, acetaminophen, which is Tylenol. There are unfortunately, in many vaccines, there are constituents within the vaccines that cause mitochondrial damage. Some chemotherapy agents, some antidepressants like sertraline and Prozac, corticosteroids, which we'll talk about later, metformin, which we'll talk about later, and even some general anesthesia. So on antibiotic remediation, again, we've got MindWise, CardioGize, or MegaGize for the CoQ10 for the mitochondrial support. And here's an interesting thing. HIIT training, which is a high intensity interval training in a workout, that is one of the few things that actually stimulates the growth of new mitochondria. So that's another reason to get to the gym or to do some very intensive workouts is to get your mitochondria back in action again. Okay. Antidepressants, which would include Celexa, Lexapro, Prozac, Paxil, Zoloft, Effexor, tricyclics, which are like the amitriptyline. There were 70.9 million antidepressant prescriptions written in 2020, I believe. And here is something to really think about. There is so much, it's very easy to write a prescription without having adequate lab work. And there is a lot that can go on in hormones, and a lot that can go on in the thyroid, and a lot that can go on with vitamin B12, and a lot that can go on with vitamin D, and a lot that can go on with iron and ferritin. There's a lot of things going on that can cause anxiety and depression in the body. So it really does behoove us to insist on lab work before accepting a medication and finding out exactly what might be wrong and fixing that deficiency. And if you can imagine how some of these people are on so many medications, how could they not have runaway deficiencies all over the place? And again, we're dealing with insurance companies who really do regulate what the doctors are able to do in terms of lab work. And I walk people through lab work all the time now, because that's how we find out what's going on. It's got to happen. And unfortunately, the insurance companies don't pay for a lot of it until you're in the hospital. And by then, you got a runaway train wreck going on. So anyway, we're on the antidepressants. Antidepressants deplete iodine. Well, imagine this. Imagine if your depression is caused by an iodine deficiency, and they put you on an antidepressant and you actually start feeling worse in other ways. Maybe your depression is muted, but there's other things in your body that start to feel like they're going wrong. It could be because of the iodine deficiency. It could be because of the CoQ10, your folate. It's hard to say, especially if you have an MTHFR gene variance. If you have the gene variance, then you're going to have a hard time processing toxins. And what are you doing when you take one of these medications? You're adding more toxin in that the body has to manage. It's really a very hard situation, and I really feel for people, because it's not fair not to know that maybe you do have an MTHFR gene variant. And I'll tell you what, if you do, that could be another hidden reason why you're really struggling with depression or anxiety and can't figure out why. And that's why you need to work so hard to keep your world clean. Because if you're not able to process toxins, then they sit there and they just create havoc in the body, right? So on the antidepressant remediation, we've got on iodine, Master Formula has Atlantic kelp in it, as does multigreens. I neglected to put that on this particular slide, but that it is in multigreens, and that's another reason multigreens is so good for us. It's also in Thiamin, so that's something to consider if you've done your research and you have determined that maybe you have a subclinical thyroid disorder going on. That's something to think about for sure. And again, CoQ10, I can say it over and over again: MindWise, OmegaGize, and CardioGize. That's where your CoQ10 is at. Your vitamin B2 is in your Super B. It's also in Master Formula. It's in Ninja Red too, I think. And then if your sodium has become imbalanced as well, we have alkaline hyponatremia, which is like a sodium deficiency, can be a real problem with SSRIs and Effexor. And anywhere from 2 to 21% of people who take one of those medications can be affected. So especially if you're not drinking, if it's an older person and they don't drink a lot of water, or they're on a diuretic, things like that. So it's really something to think about. Okay, anxiety meds. This would be like Xanax, Valium, Klonopin, or Ativan. I don't know how many people have anxiety after COVID. Pre-COVID, it was around 30%. I'm guessing it's probably closer to 50% now, if I was just going to guess. Anyway, at that time, over 18% were on anxiety meds. The problem with anxiety meds is that there's rebound anxiety, and there's also weight gain. You can have insomnia, probably because you have melatonin depletion, right? You can have heart palpitations. Your immune system is compromised, and you are at an increased risk for autoimmune disorders. The other problem with anxiety meds is because of this, you may start out being on anxiety med, but over the course of time, if it's not addressed and dealt with in another manner outside of one of these medications, then you will ultimately most likely end up on something to help you sleep and an antidepressant, because that's what happens over time. So that's something to really consider. And remember, we have meditation, we have prayer, we have community. There's yoga, there's heavy exercise, which helps burn cortisol, which helps with anxiety. We have so many ways to that are natural, community-minded ways to help burn our anxiety out, and our oils too. As Chris said, we have so many good oils for this, definitely. And food as well plays a huge part. I mean, if you want an inflamed body, and you eat foods that are inflammatory prone, that will only add to anxiety, as will dyes, high fructose corn syrup, that kind of thing, right? So you're going to want to watch your vitamin D levels closely too. I can't recommend lab work enough, because once you've identified your problem, it's so much easier to fix. It really, really is. Instead of relying on somebody to come back and tell you, well, your lab work looks just fine, when actually it's not fine. The problem is they didn't test what they should have tested to find out where the problem is. So that's it's super important. Moving right along. On blood pressure medication, these are some of the most important medications people are on, because blood pressure, when it's elevated for extended periods of time, affects the heart and brain vascularly. There's lots of ways to bring blood pressure down naturally. There are people who have genetic issues, and that just doesn't happen easily, but there are ways. And the majority of blood pressure medicine has significant side effects that can include loss of libido, loss of smell or taste, I'm just going to do a shout out for zinc over there. If your zinc levels are too low, that can happen too. So that's something to look into for sure. Hair loss, slower wound healing. You have an increased risk of cancer, leg cramps, weight gain, bone loss, heart disease, irregular heartbeat, memory loss, insomnia, autoimmune disorders, fatigue. These are all side effects related to the items that we have here: the zinc, magnesium, potassium, calcium, CoQ10, melatonin, vitamin D, calcium, the deficiencies. It's all related to that too, in addition to having to really work through, why is your blood pressure high? Again, is it what you're eating? Is it your stress that you're not managing well? We've had so many good calls about how to manage stress more easily. I think I saw somewhere that if you have chronic stress, it's like having a pack a day habit in smoking, right? So it's really, really things to think about for sure. Anyway, here is your blood pressure medication remediation opportunities here. Don't be afraid of mineral essence. Find a way to use it and get it in your body. The micronutrients are really important. Your Ninja Red, again, your Mind Wise, Omega Gies, and Cardio Gies. I can't say enough about those three. Getting your CoQ10 in is really important, right? And that's a good point. Put your mineral essence in red drink. Just make it easy. Get it done. Okay, on steroids. This includes oral, topical, inhaled, and injected. We tend to see these most as inhaled or topically. And then you forget that they actually affect the entire body. Remember, the skin is a very porous organ, and it absorbs everything. And I have a friend who nearly lost her life from overusing a steroid cream because it caused such damage to her body. So don't underestimate the amount of steroid that you might be getting from a steroid cream, right? Steroids have 1,001 uses and 1,001 side effects. Those side effects over time include hypothyroidism, depression, weight gain, decreased immunity, osteoporosis, hypertension, diabetes, eye disorders that include cataracts and glaucoma, thinning of skin, candida overgrowth, and fluid retention. And again, when you start losing minerals, you're going to start losing bone. When you lose iodine, you're going to start having some major effect on your thyroid. You'll also have major effect on your mitochondria. I didn't mention that earlier, but iodine is very important to the mitochondrial function as well. Here's your steroid remediation. You're going to want to watch your thyroid and your blood glucose closely. Okay, cholesterol meds. I am not a fan of statins, and I'm very vocal about that. We've been told that high cholesterol is the cause of heart disease, and that is not true. Inflammation is the cause of heart disease. Life cannot happen without cholesterol. Cholesterol is needed for every cell to function properly. Without it, we would have leaky cells that would lead to chronic illness and cancer. Additionally, 50% of our brain is cholesterol. Now imagine what would happen when you start losing cholesterol in your brain. Cholesterol is also needed for optimal neurological function. The myelin sheath, which is kind of like the rubber on the cord, for your extension cord or whatever, if that becomes nicked or wears thin, then the electrical impulses don't work well on an extension cord. They're not going to work well in your body either. And emotionally, low levels of cholesterol will start inhibiting serotonin receptors from functioning properly. So what happens there if your serotonin receptors are not functioning properly? There you go. It's all tied together. It's just so important to understand this, you guys. Cholesterol is also critical for our adrenal hormones and our sex hormones to work properly. It's a precursor to vitamin D function or production. It's needed for a healthy immune system. It's interesting because people who have lower levels of cholesterol tend to be sicker people. Now, you don't want, I don't have time to go all into cholesterol by itself, but if you have super high triglycerides, the triglycerides are kind of the tattletale, and they're the tattletale because they're telling the doctor or the health practitioner that you've been you've overdone it on a fairly regular basis for carbs and sugar, right? Yeah. So, but when you have low cholesterol, you'll end up with low adrenal hormones, and this is associated with many diseases and dysfunctions. Anything from arthritis to chronic fatigue to infertility to Hashimoto's. Again, the problem is not inflammation, or the problem is inflammation. The problem is not cholesterol. And I will leave you with this. If your HDL, LDL, and triglycerides are all balanced properly, and your cholesterol is over 200, you are in a category generally as one of those people who will have, your brain will be operating in a very sharp, high functioning way as you age. The people who have cholesterol at like 150, 160, 170, 180, those people, as they age, they're the ones who are more likely to get dementia as they age. All right. Here's your options again, your MindWise, Omega-Gize, and Cardio-Gize on our statins. Really want to think about that. I want to talk just a second. So how does the body respond to suboptimal adrenal function? It does that by trying to create more cholesterol to prime the pump, so to speak, in the adrenal pathway. So you first have to support your adrenal glands. If you don't do that, then you might make things worse by trying to strip your body of the cholesterol it's trying to make. So you really do want to support your adrenal glands, and you can do that by using products that support or may contain DHEA. And we have, for women, Young Living has a cream called Prenolone Plus cream. We also have Endogize, we have Cortistop, and we have PD 8020. All of those contain DHEA, which is a precursor for progesterone, pregnenolone, and ultimately testosterone, which is something that we all need. So, okay, there's another grouping of cholesterol meds, the fibrates, which is Tricor and Zetia. And again, most minerals and B vitamins are depleted when you're on these long term. And there's your remediation for the fibrates. Okay, on type 2 diabetic meds, I just put 3 of the most common ones we're seeing right now that are orals, the glyburide, glipizide, and metformin. You'll notice that the CoQ10 again is on both of them. CoQ10 gets hit so hard by medication, and you really do want to mediate that. Glyburide and glipizide is vitamin B12 and folate, and metformin is B vitamins, and then again you got additional mitochondrial damage for the metformin. So you really want to take care of your mitochondria however you can. The side effects of glyburide and glipizide over time are fatigue, weakness, muscle cramps, memory loss, increased risk of cancer, frequent infections, liver damage, and heart disease. And again, well, it goes back to the CoQ10 for the most part. And on the metformin, it's increased risk of heart disease, higher homocysteine levels, which is a inflammatory marker, increased risk of infection, fatigue, anemia, memory loss, and muscle cramps. And you might, I think somebody mentioned on the chat, I'm just have half of an eyeball on the chat, you guys. So I'm just seeing things every once in a while. But you might do some research on an herbal supplement called berberine, and look into that if you happen to be on metformin. And here's your remediation for type 2 diabetic meds. All right. Again, MindWise, OmegaGize, and CardioGize all the way. On the diuretics, long-term use of these things, increased risk of osteoporosis, heart disease, slower wound healing, frequent infections, leg cramps, depression, memory loss, lowered immunity, vision problems, edema, weight gain, hair loss, increased risk of high blood pressure, which is kind of ironic because it's often used to decrease blood pressure, fatigue, and mood swings. And diuretics they do deplete the body of quite a few things. The B vitamins, vitamin C, pretty much all the major minerals you'll see on lab work, and and sodium too. So here's your remediation for diuretics. Oh, I lost my. Okay. On your NSAIDs, that would be like Celebrex, ibuprofen, your Motrin, that kind of thing. Long-term use increases risk of heart disease, again, high homocysteine levels, cervical dysplasia, higher risk of cancer, birth defects, depression, anemia, mouth sores, hypothyroidism, vitamin C, folate, and iron. Iron is really important whenever iron is very complex. And whenever you get iron tested on your lab work, you need to get iron and ferritin both checked. There's more to it than that, but don't ever just get iron checked. You need to get your ferritin levels checked as well. Okay. Birth control, oral contraceptives, and hormone replacement therapy. Long-term side effects are heart disease, fatigue, candida, increased risk of stroke and cancer, irritable bowel syndrome, depression, insomnia, decreased immunity or immune system function decrease, memory loss, irritability, nerve pain, hypothyroidism. Again, iodine is really important, increased risk of breast cancer, and decreased ability to cope. The depletions are vast, and so are the side effects. I mean, I just read some of the top ones, but the side effects for birth control pills is absolutely enormous. And I really encourage, if you have a younger generation who is on birth controls or contemplating birth control, to really get a really good grasp of what is going to happen within the body when you're on birth control for any length of time. It is, there's more to it than just the easy part of taking a pill. I just promise you that it may be something that you might want to rethink. Depleting the beneficial bacteria, obviously we see how that fits in with all of the gut issues, magnesium and zinc, and most minerals, vitamin B, C, and iodine. I mean, when your thyroid goes off and your coping mechanisms go off and your sex hormones go off, you are on a three-legged stool that can be highly destructive as a woman. And there's a class I teach on this that really drills into this very deeply. But it is so important to understand that three-legged stool, when it starts wobbling, you really risk going down a slippery slope. So it really behooves you to take good care of your thyroid, your sex hormones, and your stress as a woman. I mean, it's important for a man too, but it's much, much more important for a woman because our three-legged stool gets wobbly really fast. Okay. Okay. There's some options for birth control if somebody's absolutely going to stay on it. Here's the other thing about birth control too, just as a reminder, if somebody is on birth control, they should not be taking Progessence Plus or using Progessence Plus, right? I need to zip through these last slides. I'm going a little over, I'm sorry. Analgesics, this would be acetaminophen, codeine, hydrocodone, oxycodone, and so on. Glutathione, melatonin, and mitochondrial damage. I mean, these are some big ones, you guys, right? Side effects long-term are fatigue, depression, heightened pain response, and this happens. If the longer you're on a pain medicine of this nature, especially the codeine and hydrocodone, oxycodone, etc., like what normally wouldn't hurt you, like if you stumped your toe, you might say ow and move on. You might feel like your toe is broken after that, because your pain receptors act completely differently. Let's see. So you want to increase your vitamin C intake. You want to seek out sulfur-rich foods, selenium-rich foods, and follow the mitochondrial support suggestions there. And again, you guys, these recommendations are just that, they're recommendations. It's up to you as the individual. And I mean, you are the CEO of your own body. You're this and your family. And I'm just giving you information that I wish that as pharmacists, we had time. First of all, we had time to actually talk about this as people are picking things up, but the reality is we don't. And second of all, most pharmacists are not aware of the nutritional enzyme hormone depletions that actually happen. And I mentored kids that were coming out of pharmacy school before I stepped out from behind the pharmacy counter, and it's still not being taught. It's still not being taught. So you guys, there is, it is just really up to us to do our own research and to know what works best for us. And with that, I end. So.
Wait, you said you're ending? That's it?
I'm going to end because I think we have a second part, right? I will say
We do, but we could always go over just a smidge. This is such fabulous information, and I don't know if anyone would want you to stop. Do you have anything else you'd like to share? I know we have quite a few questions we probably could pull up.
Okay, well, if you, we can go through some questions if you want. I have, like I said, I've only had like a corner of an eyeball on questions, so I couldn't talk and look at the chat at the same time.
Yes. Okay, well, how about folks, because there is so many questions in here, let's go try to go through a few. So if you have some, can you put it back in? But I know I saw a few. So do you have a good iodine supplement besides what we have available in Thyromin that you suggest?
So first of all, and if I don't know if everybody's in Splash, hopefully everybody's in Splash, but I just wrote about iodine a few weeks ago in Splash Wild Lifestyle, which is Danette's group.
We'll put the link back in here. I know Danette put it in here once. We'll do it again.
Okay. Because I would really recommend going back and reading. I think there's 2 posts on iodine to fully understand. You can do an iodine patch test to see if you're iodine deplete, and you can also do an iodine P test, which requires the help of a health professional, and it's a 24-hour iodine challenge, and then that way you can find out if you're actually deplete in iodine or not.
Okay, go ahead.
There's another thing, and I wasn't going to say anything about the book, but I just wrote the volume 1 of it's called Becoming Your Own Health Detective, and you can find it on my website, which is goodmedicine.info, and you can also find it on Amazon, and it covers I've got another volume 2 that's coming that will probably be out maybe around Christmas time, but it will be really helpful in helping you guys figure out exactly what's going on in your body. This is kind of not what we were talking about, but it does go with the topic a bit. And I'll give one of these away tonight. I don't know how we can figure out how to give one away, but I'll mail one to somebody if we want to figure out how to do that.
I could let Danette pick someone. I hate to pick someone and then someone be mad at me, but we'll get that figured out. We can always do a random drawing and put everyone's names in here. Someone asked if you could show the slide again with NS, how do you say it again?
The NSAIDs, the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory.
Yeah, recommendations.
So these are mediators, but what I would really recommend if somebody is on an NSAID, I mean, my first question would be, and I'm just going to say it, have you tried BLM or Agiles and sulfurzyme? You know, I would consider that. Right?
Yeah, of course. Okay, goodness. Okay, I'm just going through these questions. Okay. Some people put some links in here. Question is that, and we know like Quest Lab does it and that kind of stuff, but if someone does not have health insurance or they really want a good panel of deficiencies, do you have a suggestion for that? Because like Quest Lab does, you know, thyroid and vitamin D and CBC, that kind of stuff, but they don't get into like your Bs and, you know, iodine, that kind of stuff.
Okay, if there are healthcare practitioners that will do it. I actually do it as well. And if somebody wants to walk through that, they can go to my website, and it says Good Medicine. It's goodmedicine.info, and they can book a call and we can set it up. So
you set up going over the blood work or having it blood work ran?
Both. I do both.
So can you talk about that for a second? So what kind of blood work do you actually have ran?
So I do a wide variety, and it's going to depend on the individual, but it can definitely be run.
Okay.
I mean, that's a long conversation.
Okay. Okay, and
Very,
does you let,
very dependent upon the individual.
okay. Okay, great. Let's see what else. No idea how many minerals could depleted to cover circles.
I think Danette said Marlene won. Marlene, if you will, or Danette, maybe if somebody has Marlene's address and sends me, after this is all over with, send me Marlene's address, please.
I'm getting it for you.
Thank you.
You deserve a standing ovation. This was fantastic. Thank you.
I'm sorry I went so fast. I was trying to cover it all in an hour.
Yes, very good information. Let's see, spectral cell. Okay, so those are that. What else do we have here? Well, if nothing else here, so much great information. This was recorded, so you can go to Grow, Jill Oncal's group to hear this recording again. It'll be up by Friday for sure. And Liz here has, her website is goodmedicine.info. Her book is Becoming Your Own Health Detective. She does do personal consultations as well. And this is just obviously very exciting information that we probably all need to listen to again and really take some further notes. So Liz, thank you so much for all of your wealth of knowledge, and then wanting to even help people, especially with the field that you're in, what they can do for themselves naturally to hopefully support themselves and be in as best homeostasis as possible. So thank you so much. And we'll get this recording out to you guys as soon as possible. And it's great to know that you do consultations, because many people just need that kind of support. So that's really fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to stop this recording.
Well, thank you guys.
Oh, go ahead. Okay, hold on.